Skull Nation, we have a massive wound being reopened today, and it hurts because it involves the greatest to ever do it in purple and gold. We are talking about the legendary Adrian Peterson, and a revelation that explains exactly why the greatest era of our backfield ended in such a bitter way back in 2016. It turns out the tension between AP and Mike Zimmer was way worse than we ever imagined, and it all came down to respect. We are pushing for 3,000 subscribers right now, so join the tribe, hit subscribe, and comment your city name below. We all know Adrian Peterson is a god in Minnesota, and seeing him recently named to the Vikings Ring of Honor was one of the most emotional moments we have ever shared as a fan base. But behind that legendary career that spanned from 2007 to 2016, there is a dark cloud that has finally been revealed to us all. We always suspected that the end of his era in Minnesota was messy, but now we are hearing the raw truth from the man himself about his relationship with former head coach Mike Zimmer. Peterson recently went on the Ed Block CourageCast podcast, and he did not hold anything back regarding how things truly fell apart during that final season. It turns out that Mike Zimmer had a nasty habit of rubbing players the wrong way, and that did not stop even when it came to the greatest running back in the history of our franchise. Adrian confessed that he was not even shocked when the team decided not to exercise his contract option for the 2017 season because the bridge had already been burned by his head coach. This is the kind of stuff that makes your blood boil as a fan, because we are talking about a player who gave his soul to this city and this organization for a decade. Adrian mentioned that a lot of people know the inside of things that go on, but for him it came down to a simple feeling of being disrespected by the man leading the team. Can you imagine the pressure and the ego involved when a legendary workhorse like Peterson feels like he is being treated like a common backup? Peterson looked back and admitted he might have handled things differently to avoid the team going out and shopping for his replacement, but the damage was already done. He made it very clear that his issue was never with the Vikings organization itself or the fans who loved him, but it was strictly with the head coach who challenged his very being. How do we feel about this as a community? Do we side with the hard-nosed coach or the legendary player who carried us through the dark years? I need you to think about that, because this is the root of the succession story that changed our team forever. The financial side of this story is absolutely explosive, because if the Vikings had exercised that option, they would have owed a 31-year-old running back a staggering $18 million for the season. We have to be honest here, because that is an extreme number for any veteran, but the real tension started with an injury that felt like a nightmare for every one of us watching. Just 2 games into the 2016 season, during our very first game at the brand new US Bank Stadium, Adrian tore 90% of his meniscus. This was his second serious knee injury in just 6 seasons, and the path to recovery became a total war zone between him and the coaching staff. Adrian recalled having 2 difficult options where he could either do a full repair with a 40% chance it would not heal, or he could just cut it out and eventually deal with bone-on-bone pain. He chose the repair because he had a vision for his comeback that nobody else seemed to believe in at the time. He admitted that he was not really listening to what everyone else had to say outside of the medical professionals, because his competitive drive is simply on another level. He truly believed he could defy the odds and return to the field in a time frame that would usually end anyone else's entire season. But that game plan and that mental toughness seemed to be the exact thing that caused the rift with Mike Zimmer, who had a very different perspective on the situation. Zimmer was known for being a tough guy, but this situation proved that his lack of empathy for a superstar's recovery process was reaching a breaking point. It is wild to think that the same grit that made Adrian a legend was the very thing that Zimmer used against him during the most vulnerable moment of his career. Imagine being the face of a franchise and having your own coach question your plan to get back on the field for your teammates. This was not just about a knee injury anymore, it was about who held the power in that locker room and whether or not legendary status earned you any grace. The season was spiraling, and after missing 11 long weeks while recovering from surgery, Adrian Peterson finally made his return to a team that was sitting at 7-6. We were right in the middle of a heated race for an NFC playoff spot, and we needed a spark more than ever. The defining moment of this tragedy happened in Week 15 against a mediocre Colts squad when we were fighting to keep our playoff hopes alive in front of our home crowd. We all remember that game as a total disaster because the Vikings got thumped 34-7 and Adrian struggled to find any room to run. He finished that afternoon with just 22 yards on 6 carries, and it was clear that he was not the same explosive force we were used to seeing. After that humiliating loss, the reality set in that our chances of making the postseason had dropped to 0%, and it was time for a business decision. Adrian realized that with the playoffs out of reach and his contract expiring, he needed to shut it down to rest and protect his future. He felt that after everything he had sacrificed to come back early, he had earned the right to look toward the next year. But according to Adrian, this decision rubbed Mike Zimmer the wrong way, and that is where the situation turned truly ugly. They had words, and Zimmer allegedly said things that were deeply disrespectful by challenging Peterson's competitive spirit and his entire character. Can you believe that? A coach telling Adrian Peterson that he is not a competitor after he just rushed back from a major surgery to try and save a dying season. It is absolutely ridiculous, and it shows the toxic environment that was brewing behind the scenes in Minnesota. Peterson was hoping his massive effort to return would have garnered some appreciation from a hard-nosed coach like Zimmer, but instead he was called out and insulted. This was the moment the relationship died and the legendary number 28 knew his time in Minnesota was officially coming to an end. It was a cold and heartless way to treat a man who had become the heartbeat of our entire state. The fallout from that confrontation was swift, and it changed the trajectory of the Vikings' backfield for the next decade as we moved into a new era. Because they decided to move on from a legend, the team went out and signed Latavius Murray in free agency and spent a second-round pick on Dalvin Cook. Murray actually ended up leading the team in rushing during that 2017 season, while Dalvin Cook eventually became the new workhorse and the star running back we all grew to love. But you have to wonder what could have happened if there was more respect in that building between the coach and the star player. Peterson was very clear that he did not feel disrespected by the organization or the fans, but specifically by the head coach who failed to see the human being behind the athlete. He felt that if he had handled the conflict differently, maybe the team wouldn't have gone shopping for someone else so quickly, but the disrespect was too much to ignore. We finished that 2016 season with an 8-8 record, which was just one game behind the Lions, who took the wild card spot. It was a year of what-ifs and missed opportunities that was fueled by internal tension that we are only now fully understanding in 2026. Peterson has since moved on and played for other great organizations, and he has found peace with how things ended, because it allowed his kids to see the world and experience new things. He understands that everything happens for a reason, but that does not take away the sting of hearing how a legend was treated on his way out the door. It makes you realize that even the greatest players are often at the mercy of coaching personalities that do not value loyalty the same way fans do. We look back at the Zimmer era with mixed emotions, but this story about Adrian Peterson really highlights the disconnect that eventually led to a total culture change in Minnesota. It is a reminder that the bonds between players and coaches are fragile, and when respect is lost, there is no amount of talent that can save the relationship. I am honestly losing my mind thinking about how much more Peterson could have given us if he felt supported. Looking back from our current perspective in 2026, it is clear that Adrian Peterson remains the undisputed king of Minnesota football, regardless of how Mike Zimmer felt about his competitive fire. That final season in 2016 was a turning point that forced us to grow as a team, but it still feels like a betrayal to hear that our greatest weapon was being insulted behind closed doors. Peterson has handled this with incredible class, and even though he felt disrespected, he still speaks about the situation with a level of maturity that shows why he is a true leader. He is now where he belongs in the Ring of Honor, and his legacy will outlast any coaching tenure or any bitter argument in a locker room. We are building something special here in our community, and I want to know exactly where you stand on this explosive revelation. Was Mike Zimmer right to challenge a veteran who decided to shut it down after the playoffs were out of reach, or did he cross a line that should never be crossed with a franchise legend? Does this change the way you look at the 2017 transition to Dalvin Cook and the end of the Peterson era? I want to see your fire in the comments right now, because this is our history, and we are the ones who keep the memory of this team alive. We are pushing for those 3,000 subscribers, and we need every single one of you to join the tribe so we can keep bringing you the raw truth about the Vikings. Your voice matters more than any coach's ego, and I am waiting to read your take on this legendary fallout. We are a family, and we stand by the players who gave us everything on that field through the wins and the crushing losses. Thank you for being part of this journey and for showing the world why Minnesota has the most passionate fans in the NFL. It is time to honor the legends and learn from the mistakes of the past. Skol.